Hello, I'm Professor Malati Mathur with the Faculty of English at IGNOU, and today I will be talking to you about a specific course which is a part of your syllabus for MA English, and that is MAG1, which pertains to British poetry. And I will more specifically be talking about Block 7, where we discuss the Romantic poets of that age, and we will also be talking about a review of the Romantic age, where we will talk about what the poets thought about, what is it that influenced their ideas and concepts, what was it that consumed them so intensely that they just had to express themselves in verse. When we talk about Romanticism, we need to know what qualities are associated with this particular term. How is it different from what went previously? How is it different from the Augustan age or the Age of Reason, which had luminaries like Alexander Pope and John Dryden? Not to say that the Romantic period did not have its own luminaries. You had Wordsworth and Blake and Keats and Shelley, Byron, just to name a few of them. And I'm just talking about people who were there in the field of writing. You had numerous others, painters, musicians. You must remember, you must understand that any changes that take place in society will impact all facets of human life and human creativity. So it will not just be one aspect that will reflect what the changes are. All the facets of human creativity will reflect those changes. So what are the qualities that are associated with Romanticism? One thing that springs out at us when we read the poetry is the intense emotion, the intense imagery that we can see so prominently displayed. What are these emotions? They can be emotions of love, a very deep appreciation of beauty, and a sense of patriotism that rings through their verse. These feelings, obviously feelings are abstract. How does one express them? How does one express them through poetry? It is done by evoking very powerful images. So when a romantic poet meditates upon an idea, it brings forth a philosophy, and a sublime strain of poetry is born. So when we talk about images evoking certain states of feeling, what we are talking about is symbols and symbolism. What is a symbol? When one object stands for something else than what it really is, then it becomes a symbol. The Romantics also, you find, take great delight in the use of similes and metaphors, both of which are terms for comparisons, different types of comparison. Let's look at Shelley, for instance. Shelley's Skylark is compared to a poet, a cloud of fire, a star of heaven, a high-born maiden, a glowworm golden. A tiny little bird is compared to so many different kinds of things. And here, what has happened? The bird becomes a symbol. It becomes more and more powerful until it is seen as a participating agent in Shelley's own state of feeling and the experience that he would like to share with his readers. And what does he say to the bird? He says, "Teach me half the gladness that thy brain must know." It is that happiness, that intensity of joy that the skylark probably feels, which gives rise to that sublime strain of music. Shelley then calls out to his beloved thus in another poem. He says, "The fountains mingle with the river, and the rivers with the ocean. The winds of heaven mix forever with a sweet emotion. Nothing in the world is single. All things by a law divine in one another's being mingle. Why not I with thine?" So by bringing in the natural objects like the clouds, the sky, the earth, what Shelley does is he elevates his personal emotion, this desire to be one with his beloved. This commonplace human desire is elevated to the universal state. And he wants to say that what he feels is something that is part of the universe. Let's look at Keats now. For him, what happens? The same thing, emotional experience finds its equivalence in images. In Ode to a Nightingale, for instance, the song of the bird is seen or is presented to us against the backdrop of universal human experience. What does he say? The voice I hear this passing night was heard in ancient days by emperor and clown. And in the Grecian urn, Keats does something very similar. He talks of the urn as still unravished bride of quietness, the foster child of silence and slow time. Once the image on the urn, the vase, is frozen, obviously, in time and in stillness and in space, the urn becomes a permanent object. So the figures on the urn are frozen in eternity. They will never become old. Their love will never become stale. So they will remain lovers. They will remain young. The spring season that they are part of will always remain spring. It will never fade into autumn and winter. So the present moment has been fused into the past as well as into the future. What Keats wanted to do and what other romantics wanted to do was they wanted to create poetry in a world which they saw as bereft of or absent where this was absent. And what was it? Mythic grandeur. And they thought that poetry should fulfill the purpose of searching for this wonder. And where is this wonder to be found? In the depths of the human heart, in the emotions, in the desires, in the feelings of the human heart. Now, Wordsworth, for him, emotional experience leads to meditation. Many of his images are crowned by what he calls a visionary gleam. It leads him to something much, much beyond what is there in this world. Wordsworth also displays this propensity for comparison. For instance, in his poem on the skylark, he calls the skylark as a pilgrim of the sky. And the word pilgrim, the comparison, is very, very telling. As I just said, for Wordsworth, commonplace objects lead to a kind of a higher vision, a more spiritual kind of an experience. And to use the word pilgrim is to automatically associate it with a spiritual state of being. For Wordsworth, sometimes he can have a disturbing experience, but no matter how disturbing it may be, the final moments, the culmination of it, the climax of it, is always serenity, is always clarity. Sometimes he sees an apparition, and for him, it becomes a moment's ornament. And the eyes of the apparition, he says, are as stars of twilight fair. He finds the image haunting, it startles, it waylays him, but yet when it is seen closer, from a closer viewpoint, it remains a spirit, and yet it is a woman too. So when he sees her with his serene eyes, she is a being breathing thoughtful breath, a traveler between life and death. This is something that I illustrated from Wordsworth's poem, She Was a Phantom of Delight. There's a beautiful poem that Byron has written on the ocean. The description of the ocean is absolutely majestic. It evokes the power, the might of the ocean, especially when pitted against the weakness, the vulnerability of human beings. The life and force of this ocean is conveyed through images which are dynamic. The images actually bring to life the movement, the roar of the ocean. Roll on, thou deep and dark blue ocean. Roll, he says. And the sweep and the grandeur and the range, the width of the ocean is held up in contrast to the weak and helpless being that a human being is. And what does he compare this to? He says that human beings, like a drop of rain, he sinks into thy depths. Although Byron was seen as a satirist, he has his moments of lyrical brilliance when his comparisons bring out something so clear that those images stay with you, even if you've read the poem only once. He brings together appreciation of human beauty and natural loveliness.
There be none of beauty's daughters with a magic like thee, and like music on the waters is thy sweet voice to me, when as if its sound were causing the charmed ocean's pausing, the waves lie still and gleaming, and the lulled winds seem dreaming. And the midnight moon is weaving her bright chain o'er the deep, whose breast is gently heaving as an infant's asleep. So the spirit bows before thee to listen and adore thee, with a full but soft emotion, like the swell of summer's ocean.
Just take a look at these couple of lines from his poem. She walks in beauty. She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes. So this juxtaposition, the placing together of these contrasting elements of light and dark, it brings out a picture of charm, while cloudless climes suggests peace and rest.
She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies. And all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes, thus mellowed to that tender light which heaven to gaudy day denies. One shade the more, one ray the less, had half impaired the nameless grace which waves in every raven tress, or softly lightens o'er her face, where thoughts serenely sweet express how pure, how dear their dwelling place. And on that cheek, and o'er that brow, so soft, so calm, yet eloquent, the smiles that win, the tints that glow, but tell of days in goodness spent, a mind at peace with all below, a heart whose love is innocent.
Why did these changes take place? There was a changed perspective. What had happened? Politically, the reign of George III had been marked by great turmoil. There was a lot of unrest. Corruption could be seen in all walks of life. And across the Channel, in France, there was the French Revolution. As Wordsworth says, bliss was it in that dawn to be alive. The elite society wanted some kind of a change. They did not wish to continue with this kind of confusion and uncertainty and political turmoil that was prevalent at that time, the corruption that was there. So what was happening was the despotic rule, the rule of tyrants was weakening, and this had already happened across the Atlantic in America. How small of all that human hearts endure, that part which laws or kings can cause or cure. So what is the poet trying to say? That is, it is only a very small part of a human being's life that a law or a king can change, because most of it is dictated by our own sentiments, our own ideas. The previous age, the age of reason, the age of Dryden and Pope, was now viewed as something which had turned man into a mindless, into a kind of a machine, a kind of a robot, a soulless kind of a machine. And it was seen as demotion of an individual. It was bringing him down, bringing the stature of human beings down. What had happened was imagination, sensitivity, feelings, spontaneity, and freedom, they all were seen to have been stifled in the previous age. And these poets felt that people must now liberate themselves from these kind of chains which chained them to reason alone, to intellect alone. So humanity was now viewed as something which was unique, which was diverse, and what had been the clarion call earlier, dare to be, replaced what had been earlier the clarion call of dare to know. So to know pertains to the intellect, to the brain, to the reason, and dare to be is more to do with what one is as a person, which means a lot of emotion, a lot of sentiment, a lot of intensity. Music also took inspiration from art and literature, and you can see in the music of that age how these different skeins, how these different threads were interwoven. William Blake looked at the narrowness of urban society. He was disgusted with that. And he said that this insistence on what is known as good sense and the advocacy of the use of the heroic couplet, which Dryden and Pope used, he found it tiresome. And he felt that not only were the ideas, but also the insistence on a certain form of writing was stifling, was something that was confining to the creative spirit. What does he say? He says, the languid strings do scarcely move, the sound is forced, the notes are few. Now he's brought in the comparison to a musical instrument, to a harp, where the strings practically do not move because of the constraints that have been imposed upon them. So he is referring to ideas as well as to the meter, the heroic couplet, that had been advocated as what should be the instrument of expression.
I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not, my wrath did grow. And I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears. And I sunned it with smiles, and with soft, deceitful wiles. And it grew both day and night, till it bore an apple bright. And my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine. And into my garden stole, when the night had veiled the pole. In the morning glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree.
It was seen that the subjects, the topics of the previous age were making the hearts barren. Topics were found to be narrow in range. The earlier poets were very close to the seat of power. They were in London. They were very close to the establishment. They had friends among people who were powerful. The Romantic poets, on the other hand, were away. They were remote.
Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what heart could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry?
The topics that they chose were about ordinary people, other people would probably not even think about, leave alone write about. Who were the people that the Romantic poets focused on? The chimney sweeper, the village green, innocent children. And they wanted to bring about a change both in the social order and in the minds of people. Scott was another poet of the Romantic age who took up themes of gallantry, heroism, patriotism, and in his depiction of Lochinvar, the great ballad, he has brought in a figure of love and courage. So faithful in love and so dauntless in war, there never was a knight like the young Lochinvar. The innocence and haughtiness of a young girl is portrayed in Scott's description of the young Maisie. Tell me, thou bonny bird, when shall I marry me? He tries to bring home to us that we can be so proud in our youth. We can feel so invincible and so blind to the way that it can lead us to our fall. It is only later when we grow older that we realize how foolishly proud we were. Scott uses images of the past to express the desire for a better world. He reconstructs the previous happenings, the past age, and he makes it the present. He played a very major part in defining Scottish and British politics, and he creates a romanticized view of Scotland and the Highlands, which changed Scottish national identity. So Scott was not just a poet who wrote beautiful poetry. He was also instrumental in shaping the ideas, the identity of a people, of an entire community.
O young Lochinvar is come out of the west, through all the wide border his steed was the best, and save his good broadsword he weapons had none. He rode all unarmed, and he rode all alone. So faithful in love, and so dauntless in war, there never was knight like the young Lochinvar. He stayed not for brake, and he stopped not for stone. He swam the Esk river, where ford there was none. But ere he alighted at Netherby gate, the bride had consented, the gallant came late. For a laggard in love, and a dastard in war, was to wed the fair Ellen of brave Lochinvar. So boldly he entered the Netherby hall, among bridesmen and kinsmen and brothers and all. Then spoke the bride's father, his hand on his sword, for the poor craven bridegroom said never a word. O come ye in peace here, or come ye in war, or to dance at our bridal, young Lord Lochinvar? I long wooed your daughter, my suit you denied. Love swells like the Solway, but ebbs like the tide. And now I am come, with this lost love of mine, to lead but one measure, drink one cup of wine. There are maidens in Scotland more lovely by far, that would gladly be bride to the young Lochinvar. The bride kissed the goblet, the knight took it up, he quaffed off the wine, and he threw down the cup. She looked down to blush, and she looked up to sigh, with a smile on her lips and a tear in her eye. He took her soft hand, ere her mother could bar. Now tread we a measure, said young Lochinvar. So stately his form, and so lovely her face, there never a hall such a galliard did grace. While her mother did fret, and her father did fume, and the bridegroom stood dangling his bonnet and plume, and the bride maidens whispered, 'Twere better by far to have matched our fair cousin with young Lochinvar. One touch to her hand, and one word in her ear, when they reached the hall door, and the charger stood near. So light to the croup the fair lady he swung, so light to the saddle before her he sprung. She is won, we are gone, over bank, bush, and scaur. They'll have fleet steeds that follow, quoth young Lochinvar. There was mounting Mongrames of the Netherby clan, Forsters, Fenwicks, and Musgraves, they rode and they ran. There was racing and chasing on Cannobie Lee, but the lost bride of Netherby never did they see. So daring in love, and so dauntless in war, have ye ever heard of gallant like young Lochinvar?
There is awe and wonder in all that the Romantics write, in all that they see. They took up private themes and not public themes like the previous age. They reclaimed the territory of the imagination. They wove dreams. There were children, birds, the beauty of nature, which included human nature. There were remote lands. There were mysterious scenes, fearsome situations. All this were part of the skeins, of the tapestry of their work. They saw in a child some little plan or chart which has been shaped by himself with newly learned art. This was Wordsworth, and Wordsworth again refers to the child as mighty prophet and seer blessed. The image of the poet is something very, very important for the Romantics. How did they view a poet? Coleridge describes the creative madness of the poet, in which he envisages the immense possibilities that human beings are capable of. For he on honeydew has fed and drunk the milk of paradise. That is the poet. And what has happened is that Coleridge has raised the poet from the human level to that of a heavenly being who is possessed of special powers, a person who has drunk the milk of paradise. The poet is viewed as a sage, a wise man or woman maybe, who acts as a humanist physician to all men, and they evoke a world of escape and timeless myths, according to Keats. And Keats again says he associates poets in a brotherhood of the genius loving heart. For Blake, a poet is seen both ways, as a piper who beckons you and as a bard. So the piper is lyrical, who sings, and a bard is prophetic, who foretells the future. For Shelley, again, the poet is viewed as a prophetic figure, and Shelley has stated that poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. They are the ones who set down laws. So let us quickly sum up. What is it about the Romantic age and the Romantic poets that was different? What are the qualities that are associated with their literature, with their writing, with their verse? A lot of images, a lot of emotion, intensity of emotion, which are expressed through powerful images, symbolism, certain objects representing states of feeling or certain ideas. They experienced great awe and wonder in viewing ordinary, commonplace things and objects and people. There was an attempt to bring about a change in the mind, the individual mind, as well as in society as a whole. And for them, the poet is a figure who is extremely significant in society, is viewed as someone who is not of this world, who is of this world, but still has been elevated, is raised much, much above it, and is imbued with some kind of heavenly powers which allows them to express sublime thoughts. And with that, I'd like to conclude this session. I'll come back to you later when we discuss some other poets. Thank you.